feel like everyone knows you from Dragon Mount. Like they know Jason Denzel from Dragon Mount, but do they really know who you are as a person? Like what are you into besides, the Wheel of Time? And they might not know Jason Denzel, the author. I guess for the most part, these questions are going to be, some of them are about you, some of them about the Wheel of Time, some of them about your book. So we're going to kind of weave our way in between some of these and go
Let's do
for it. Yeah. Okay. So I think number one is like a soft question. If you were a Wheel of Time character, who would you be?
When I was younger, and starting Drag Him Out, I really identified with Rand, and that he was my guy, and that's who I really enjoyed, and I could really see myself in him and everything. But these days, being a lot older than Rand is, and knowing that the hell that Rand went through, I think that if I were to go in and if I had to possess someone's and go through or whatever, I'd probably be Cadsuane. And
I love
because
this answer. Tell me more.
because 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 there's a sense of there's a sense of confidence and maturity, and there's wisdom there's strength there. I mean, there's one power strength, which is always nice to
Yeah.
have, and there's also, but just control the situation. And I think that she's that old school leader, and I admire her. I mean, she drives me crazy, in some ways, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I'd rather be her than I'd rather be, a lot of other people who get bullied by her.
There's also something almost unassuming about her where she could
Mm.
be sitting in the room, maybe doing some embroidery, and you wouldn't look twice, but she knows
Hmm.
everything that's going on in that room
Yes.
without looking up. Love that about Cat
Yeah,
Swain.
that's true. I love the idea of it's something that I try to do, despite what we're doing here in this podcast where I'm chatting so much. But I do tend to I strive to be that person who is listening and observing more than just blurting out something. Like I try to be very specific with what I'm saying when it's time to say it.
Okay, the next question is, what is something you are saving up for?
So yeah, we talked about a little about this earlier, and I think that in general, what I'm saving up for is the perhaps taking a sabbatical from work eventually and being able to write more full time. Um,
I'm really curious about this one. How many times have you read The Wheel of Time?
Not as many as probably most people think. I honestly don't know the full number, and it's one of those things where like I've read The Eye of the World and The Great Hunt probably a lot more times than I've read the later books. I think I've read the last three books twice. Once in a beta format, a
Mhm.
pre-release format where I was one of the beta readers, and then again after publication, maybe a year or two later after that. Feel like I'm immersed in that world constantly, even if I
Yeah.
haven't sat down straight and just read it. One of my favorite scenes is like when Rand and Min are together at the end of Path of Daggers, and Rand is putting the Ashaman to sleep because he's gone insane, and they've got the cup of sleep. And I I go back every now and then just to read that chapter alone because I just think it's so well done and it's so well written. So I'll go there with like a writer mind and you know that perspective of trying to see how did Robert Jordan do this? How did he bring out those feels for me the first time I
Hmm.
read that? And what were his tricks? What was the method by which he was doing that? So I do a lot of
Yeah.
that too with his
I
books.
was going to say there's probably chapters in particular that you find yourself going back to. I mean, for me, I think this is maybe a weird one, maybe not a common one, but that Heath Tower part in the prologue of, I think, second to last book. But it's
Towers,
no,
yeah.
yeah, it might be Towers,
Mm.
but it's no big name characters. We have all of these new people pop up, and it's the scene where he's, giving his son the sword and
The
telling him, rise
sword,
a
yeah, yeah.
man, and the tower's about
Uh-huh.
ready to fall apart. But For me, I'm like, oh, I mean, that could be taught in a master class. I don't know any of these characters, and I'm going in immediately 100% invested in everything that's happening in their lives within minutes. And it's just like Robert Jordan, mwah, like so good,
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah, I agree. And you're right, that scene that is from Towers. And that was one that that was a scene that was like that was Robert Jordan. That was one of those that he dictated, and then that Brandon, they transcribed it for Brandon, and Brandon took it and just had to kind of flesh it out a bit. But
Hmm.
that was him. That was Robert Jordan. And
All right. So this one, favorite moment from the Wheel of Time television show.
this one was was an easy thing for me to think about. In that, my favorite scene was the Nynaeve healing scene. Like a raging sun. I know it just
Same.
it was it was remarkable. And I wish we had a little more of seeing that happen. I think we're going to see that a lot more here in season 2 and beyond.
Agreed. Hard agree. Okay. The next one, least favorite moment from the Wheel of Time television show.
And it wasn't that the scene was beautifully shot, it was beautifully acted. I don't have any problems with it. It was, and I don't know, it does make me not so popular, I don't know. But I did not enjoy the loose there in flashback scene to the Age of Legends with where,
Okay.
and
Okay.
the reason is, I mean, I loved it, the actors are wonderful and everything. In that moment, that these are like humanity is on the verge of annihilation. Like they are hours away from complete and utter destruction.
Right.
Like
Right.
they're book canon anyway. The sky is on fire, meteors are dropping, cities have been bale fired out of existence. Like they are so desperate. They are holding on by a
Yeah.
thread here. And and that's what drove this decision of these two people, Latropose, I don't know if I'm saying his name
Hmm.
right, and Luz Theron having this conversation, like,
That's
in
why
the
this meeting
book,
was coming together.
right? Like and I could see them, like maybe they weren't like screaming and finger pointing at each other, because they're more Aes Sedai, like who knows, maybe they were, but like the intensity of that conversation I always kind of imagined to be ratchet up. Like this was a desperate thing. This was reckless. This was crazy, but it was the only shot they had, and that was it. Like,
Hmm.
and none of that desperation was there. This was a very peaceful thing. This was like, oh look, there's a little baby over here cooing, and they were talking about desperate measures, but there was no sense of that. It was blue skies and cloudy
Hmm.
outside, and
Maybe we should have
airplanes
had
and
some of
birds
those
listening,
showings, coming
crashing
down.
and burning up and
Yeah.
everything like that. Yeah. So I don't.
Oh, I like this one. Your favorite song?
I know now you're throwing these are the hardball questions. Like, how do I narrow it
How do you
down?
pick?
I know. I'm like, so when I'm writing, I do a lot of like instrumental music in the
Mm,
background, and
yeah.
like you can go on YouTube and you get like these videos are like 9 hours of
Yes.
epic fantasy music. I listen to that when I'm writing. And Lightning Crashes by Live. I'm a romantic, so I've got Stuck on You, Lionel Richie.
Okay.
Um, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. I've got
Oh,
some
okay.
Journey on there. Yeah, so these are, I'm kind of, yeah, I like those. I like the big sound, like the big feels, the
Yeah.
big emotions. So
Yeah.
a lot of these, this music, this feel, this is where my stories and my characters are born from. I mean, the Mystic books in particular are really, especially the first book, are very musically themed, and the main
Hmm.
character gets her magical strength from singing and finding, and music, and that was in large part a I would listen to so much music, as we all do, right? And just, but
Yeah.
for music for me and driving around in the car and everything, what that does for me is that creates um, an environment in which these stories bubble up. And
Okay. So what's your lock screen on your phone?
So today is my girlfriend's birthday, and but I've had this one up of I'll share it with you on the camera here. Can you see that okay? So my girlfriend's
Yeah.
giving me the look, you know? I'm supposed to. And
I see
so
it.
it cracks me up every time I get it when I open it up, and I'm like, what did I do now? But
Oh,
but
that's
other
good.
time, yeah. And
Okay, so what are the names of your books for anyone listening so they know what to look for?
yeah, yeah. So I have three books out,
Hmm.
all in the same series, the Mystic Trilogy. The first book is called Mystic, and the second book is called Mystic Dragon, and then the third book that's coming out, October 11th is the conclusion, and that's Mystic Skies.
This next one, I'm very curious about this one. So, a favorite book of yours that's not The Wheel of Time.
So I'm a big fan of Dune. The first one, is a great book. I try to read it, every couple of years or listen to it on audiobook.
Hmm.
I listened to it in advance of the movie that just came out, and it's still fantastic.
How'd you like the
Um,
movie?
I thought it was a great half a movie.
Yeah.
Like it's half a story. It just kind
Yeah.
of, and it is what it is. And I mean, it was fantastic. I mean, I think it's a superb adaptation of what they had go of the book. But it just the most interesting part of that book is in the second half, and
Truth,
they're
truth.
filming that right now. So I enjoyed it. I loved it, and I really look forward to watching that one and the second part back to back someday and being like, okay, there's Dune,
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
but yeah, it's neat. And you can see it, the Robert Jordan was inspired by Dunes, and we see it, of course, with the Aiel and the Fremen and
yeah.
Rand and Muad'Dib. But it's also equally fascinating to me that, Frank Herbert was inspired by, like Lawrence of Arabia and, the idea of going out in the desert and all this kind of stuff. And
Hmm.
so, seeing that the evolution of this story idea
Do you see
is interesting to me.
do you see a lot of evolution in fantasy after the Wheel of Time? Because I know like there've been series that I've read where I'm like, oh, like this is clearly a nod to the Wheel of Time.
You see a lot, and I see it a lot too in like video games where, there's so many video games that have references to, I don't know, Wolf Brother like characters or whatever it is. But you see a lot of it in a lot of places, and that's okay. I think
Yeah.
uh, I I'm the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson is and Mistborn. Those are, and he straight up talks about this. These are, an evolution on top of the Wheel of Time, and I think, just as, you know, um, Robert Jordan intentionally, started the Wheel of Time in a sleepy little village with some dark riders chasing a bunch
Yeah.
of country bumpkins, and
Hmm.
he intentionally started it, feeling like Lord of the Rings, and then went off into a new place, and then now other people are responding to that. I think Brandon was I really like he said that it was his response to the Wheel of Time and like a continuing the conversation, and I like
Hmm.
that,
The Wheel of Time
borrowing from one
turns.
another. Right, exactly. Yes, that is so true. That's so true.
Okay. This one, if you could describe your book in 3 words or your book series in 3 words, what would they be? This is kind of hard, I think.
It is, and yeah, apprentice, mystic, and master. And what I mean by that is that the books are
Okay.
structured in that way that the main character, Pamela, this story, the series is the story of her life, and it occurs over the course of decades. It's not just, in the first book she's 16 years old, but the rest of the series is that, she ages throughout it. And so in the first one, she's attempting to become an apprentice to a mystic who's living out in the
Mhm.
woods. And then, the second book, it largely kind of focuses on her journeyman years. And then our third one is that, it's you know, much later in her life, and it's a much, she's in a place of mastery. Not it's not quite that simple, but it's I wanted to look at it from that angle. So I do tell people that, in John, the series focuses on her life as, as an apprentice and as a
Hmm.
mystic and then as a master.
I really like how you said it kind of goes from like apprentice to like mastery. I
Hmm.
mean, it almost feels like three acts, of a story or a
Uh,
play or something like that. And I think that's
yeah.
really interesting. Like, I believe that that gives people a really good idea of kind of like what to expect in terms of like how the story flows. It's just kind of it's I don't want to call it simple, but maybe elegant is the better word. But I like
Yeah, thank
that.
you. Yeah, it was, it's a traditional and pretty classical
Hmm.
story structure, of course, three-act structure, and it is, each of the three books has a three-act in it, but they themselves clearly are act one, act two, act three
Yeah.
of her life. But a lot of time passes, this is a generational saga, and so there's a lot that happens in the gaps in between that.
Yeah. Okay. So this one, I guess it might be more of a two-parter, but the question is the most beautiful place that you've ever seen, like been in person. And I also wanted to ask if there's any of that maybe put into the books, any inspiration there.
Yes, for sure. So, one of my favorite cities, probably my favorite city that I've been to outside of the U.S. is Edinburgh in Scotland.
Hmm.
What an amazing place! I love that, all the cobbled streets and the hills and the castle, of course, and all the cool things there. Um, when I was in Ireland, I knew that the island of Moth, that's the location, the primary location of the Mystic books, was inspired by Ireland. And so I took a trip to Ireland at one point um, and visited a lot of the sites. And I had discovered there. So one of the main locations in the books is Celtapar, and Celtapar is where the High Mystic, the most powerful wizard sorceress of the
Hmm.
land lives in on this island, and it's in the middle of this mystical forest, and and it's in a big clearing, and there's grass, and imagine like a big open meadow, and in the middle of the meadow is this tall tower surrounded by, I like to describe it as a moat of flowers, just all these flowers surrounding
Okay.
it. And there's other little cabins and such linger about. And there's a place in Ireland that I found after I wrote this book that exists that looks just like that. And I went and visited there, and I love it. It's the Tower of Glendalough, and um, it's just south of Dublin. I think it's just south of Dublin.
Okay.
And so I went and
Glendalough.
visited there.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yep. If you Google it, if you Google the Tower of Glendalough, and you'll get an idea of Keltbar. And it's what it is that it was this tower that was, I think it was made by some monks, if I recall. It's been a while since I read about the history, but it's this big open, clearing. And it's got this giant tower and some other buildings and maybe like a little graveyard and whatnot nearby. And it kind of accidentally um, had the same vibe as a lot of Keltapar. So I went there and I got some pictures of me staying in front of the tower, which I thought was kind of
Nice
cool.
now. Oh, okay. What weapon would you wield in an apocalyptic scenario?
I love this one. I love this question. So I'm a martial artist. I study like an old school form of kung fu, and I just so I'm familiar with working with a lot of martial arts weapons at this point. And although I wouldn't say that it's my favorite one to use per se, but I find that I I'm good at it, and
Hmm.
it works well because I'm very tall. I got really long arms, and
Hmm.
so it works well is the spear. And I feel like that, like with the spear, I can really reach that zombie from like seriously, if I stretch it and I've got a spear, like I can hit a zombie, 12 feet away from me, without just stab it from 12 feet away. I don't have to
Yeah.
get near it. I can do a distance. I feel like I can it's simple enough. At the end of the day, one end I just club them, and the other hand I'm poking them, and
Efficient.
I can move
Efficient.
through. I can efficiently get through a lot of zombies with that. There's a lot of other cooler weapons that are fun, but I wouldn't. I don't know. I wouldn't go in with like a,
Yeah, but like, what are
with
you gonna do
all
with
the complex,
nunchucks or something? Like, you
right?
don't want to get
It's
up
something.
close.
Right. Exactly. It's just there's some things that are cool. The weapons are like the ball and chains or the fancy double swords or the hook swords and things
Yeah.
like that. At the end of the day, just give me a stick with a pointy end, and I'll take care of business. That's what I like to think.
Quote of the episode at the end of the day, just give me a stick.
Just give me a stick
Yeah.
with a pointy stick.
Yes, yes. So if you were a superhero, which one of your characters would be your sidekick?
A character named Vlenar. Vlenar is a lizard-like humanoid character. In the books,
Ooh.
there's these race of a race of people called the Lagharts, and they walk upright, but they look like, imagine like a human-sized lizard that walks on its hind legs with a
Mm-hmm.
long tail, and Vlenar's a ranger. He in the first book, he is he's kind of like a guardian and a soldier and and a protector. He guards and protects Keltapar from outside trouble, but he's also very in tune with the environment, and he knows things, and he doesn't talk very much. He's one of these silent types, and
Mm-hmm.
I think I'd have him be my sidekick because he's dependable. People who read the books love him. He's I wanted him to be that character that you loved, and someone that uh even though he doesn't talk a lot, you just want to give him a big hug, and that's
Okay,
how.
this next one we've got. Okay, if you had
Oh
to sell
gosh,
your
I'm worried
soul
now.
to Shaitan, what would you ask for in exchange? A classic Asmodean scenario, I guess.
Oh man. I think I one of two things. I'm gonna give two answers. I'd want two things. If I'm selling my soul, I've got a good soul, Shaitan. So you're gonna have to give me two things here. I'd want the ability to safely travel through the cosmos. Like be able to just like I think it would be so cool to like go and like look
Stand on
at
Venus and not
Jupiter,
burn up.
stand right exactly, and or stare at Jupiter from the right distance and just bask in its awesomeness and not get destroyed by radiation and
Right.
things like that. And then the second thing is I think I'd want the time travel thing, but not to be able to change things. I mean, that'd be cool, but that just becomes weird. I'd
Yeah.
bail myself somehow. I think I'd want to
Paradoxes.
go, yeah, that just gets too messy, man. Step on the wrong leaf and my great 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 grandmother never gets born or whatever. So,
Classic Back to the
um,
Future problem.
yes, exactly. So I think I'd want to be able to time travel and observe. Like I think I'd want to
Yeah.
go back. Like if I could just be an invisible fly on the wall for any moment in time, go back and see these great moments in history, or whatever. And I think I would do that to have a better understanding of things, and just to see like, oh, so that's how that really went
Hmm.
down. That's a little bit
Yeah.
different than what we were taught. I think that'd be really neat.
Two very, very good answers, in my opinion. Okay. Oh, this one. Okay. What's one thing that annoys you the most?
People not picking up after their dog on their dog walks. There you go.
This is a really good answer. Okay. If you had wolf brother abilities with any animal that was not a wolf, which animal would you choose?
I'd probably choose a bird of some kind, like a falcon. Like I think I'd want like that heightened eyesight. I
Hmm.
think that'd be kind of cool. I just think it'd be cool. I like flying, and I think that would be a neat thing to have.
Okay. This one, we're going back to the book now. So, one of your
Yeah.
biggest challenges writing your books.
Without a doubt, it's finding the time to write them. And
Okay, this one is how some authors are known for meticulously describing certain things like outfits or meals. Is there any aspect of writing that you have a lot of fun in that just it flows?
People talk a lot about magic systems, which is going back to what we talked about earlier. Something I think that has evolved out of Robert Jordan in a long way. Like Robert
Yeah.
Jordan absolutely was maybe not the first, but certainly probably the biggest in terms of having a hard magic system where if you mix if it, five threads of fire mixed with three of
Yeah.
water and two of spirit, you get this scientific effect every single time. The only other
Mhm.
variables are is it Sidene or Sidar and these kind of things, right?
Right, right.
Um, and Brandon loved that
Oh, yeah.
and of course, and he took it to a next exponential level with
Yes.
all of his magic systems, and so I love that too. And the book I'm working on right now has a hard magic system, where I'm really excited about that. I've got a whole glossary kind of describing things that I'm
Do I
looking
get a
for.
little teaser about the magic system, or is it not, are
Yeah,
you
I can
not
tell you a little bit
allowed?
about it. Well, there's nothing allowed. I mean, so I'm happy to tell you a little bit about it. The story's still in development, right? And the magic
Yeah.
is still in development. But in general, it's an astronomy-based magic system. So
Oh,
the
cool.
basic idea is that people who can use the ability are able to reach out to celestial bodies like
Mhm.
stars, moons, primarily planets and moons, and they draw in the light from that celestial body, and
Ooh.
that light fills up their body. And so I'm simplifying here, but let's say
Mhm.
you draw in from the moon. Maybe the moon has energies that you can use for magic for healing. Maybe if you draw from a planet like Mars, you can use that for war magic. And this is an
Okay.
oversimplification, but
Yeah,
each
sure.
celestial body has different traits that you use. And so
A little
in the
bit like
system, there's
alchemy or something.
yep, exactly. Yeah. And Mystic is not quite as soft and not wishy-washy, soft and nebulous as
Mhm.
um, Lord of the Rings, but it's like I described earlier, it's based on emotion. It's based on, the life experience. The more yourself, the more attuned you are um, to the world and to this magic. And it's found through meditation. It's found through um, things like that.
Very cool. I like that. Okay. Are there any characters in your books that are inspired by people in your life?
I think that none directly one to one for sure.
Mhm.
Certainly, I think we're all inspired by our friends and family and the people we love and care about. The people we don't like, the people that we don't like and annoy us or
Yeah.
whatever. We both from our past and our present, we channel into any creative writing, right?
Mhm.
I think the only one that I can kind of point to and maybe say like, yeah, this is that specific person is the secondary character in the series, Sim, who's like he's a point of view character. Other than Pamela, he's the second biggest character of the series.
Mhm.
Sim is certainly, yeah, Sim is probably me. Maybe I would say he would be like the ideal of who I wanted to be when I was 17. And it wasn't until he saw this much bigger world and got out that things really changed and went in a way that no one kind of expected for him. And when I look back on it, his story arc through the books, I think it really shines. And I think that like I when I set out every book, I always worried about like is Sim's plot line going to be any good? Is it going to be good enough? And I feel like in all three books that it's like my favorite, or whatever,
Yeah.
and it really shines. So yeah.
Okay. So the last question, I feel like through the whole conversation, I think people could probably look to the conversation itself and know the answer to this. And it was why people should read your book. But I think, like, after talking to you and learning more about your process as a writer and where you get your inspiration from and more little bits and pieces about the series, I think that for them. They can probably piece that out for themselves easily enough. But is there anything you would want to add to that?
Um, yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, again, it always comes down to when people are like, why should I read your books? Like, oh man, that's like the hardest question,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You
right.
know, but I think that people would enjoy the Mystic Trilogy if they're looking for, like I said, a generational saga that spends decades and explores this idea that ideas that are inspired by real life Eastern mysticism,
Mhm,
set in like a fantasy version of Ireland. Ultimately, it's about one person's life. I think she's a special character who has an impact both good and bad on her world. Her actions
mhm.
have real consequences from the very start, and over the course of her life, she has to deal with those choices, right? And
Yeah.
especially in the third book, she's looking back on everything. She has regrets, and she has to accept consequences of her actions. And I think that's something that we all go through in life, And my great hope is that this is a story that feels light and accessible to begin with, but ultimately becomes a tale that really sticks with you, and resonates
Mhm.
with people. So,
It sounds like
yeah,
something that people can even grow with as well. Like maybe if you're a younger reader, you're going to identify more with book one than book three, maybe, or
for sure.
certain
Yeah.
characters' plot points in certain books, perhaps. But I like
Yeah,
that.
I certainly grew a lot writing it. So I think that that would be the case. So.